Number 14. Pencil in the head. For 55 years, Margaret Wegner had been going through sporadic headaches and nosebleeds. It wasn't until 2007 that the woman dealt with the root cause of her symptoms. When Wegner was 4 years old, she fell hard while carrying a pencil. It went through her right cheek and disappeared completely into her head. The woman remembered that it hurt like crazy. The technology at the time wasn't equipped to handle such an injury, so the removal was postponed for decades. As Wegner grew, the position of the pencil in her brain changed, which made extraction a challenging procedure. Still, the German woman surgeons were successful in taking out most of the 3-inch pencil. A small piece remained lodged in her brain, but Wegner's doctors claimed it wouldn't cause her any further harm. Number 13. Toothpick in the liver. Over the course of several months before being admitted to the hospital, a woman had become gradually weaker while experiencing low blood pressure and vomiting. Doctors then discovered a 1-inch cavity in her liver which had become infected. It turns out that the woman had swallowed a toothpick which somehow migrated to her liver from the digestive tract. It had become lodged in the organ and was responsible for her symptoms. It's a very rare situation, with only about 17 documented cases. Number 12. Worm living in woman's face. A 32-year-old Russian woman noticed a bump below her eye which, within a few days, was replaced by another above her eye. More time passed and the bump returned, settling into the woman's upper lip. She took a series of selfies to document the growth's change in position. It didn't cause her pain, but rather an itching or burning sensation. She went to the hospital and doctors revealed that the lump was actually a parasitic worm living and moving inside her face. Called Dirofilaria repens, the parasite most commonly infects canids, but it can, on rare occasion, be transmitted to humans. Mosquitoes are the typical vector, and the woman had likely got infected while visiting a rural area outside of Moscow. Once the worm was removed, the woman made a full recovery. Number 11. Hairy eyeball. An Iranian man was born with a benign tumor in his eye, just below the pupil. He'd learned to live with the tumor, but by the time he was in his late teens, it grew to be roughly 1/4 of an inch thick. Worse still, the tumor started growing hair that was protruding out of the man's eyeball. This type of rare tumor, called a limbal dermoid, can also grow cartilage and even sweat glands. It's non-cancerous, but it might impair vision. According to a case report in the New England Journal of Medicine, the man did eventually opt to have the hairy tumor removed. Number 10. 5-inch knife in his skull. While trying to stop a mugger that was attacking his friends, a London teen was stabbed in the forehead with a kitchen knife. The 5-inch blade went all the way inside the 15-year-old's skull. He was rushed to the hospital with the knife still sticking out of his head and was immediately operated on. According to his surgeons, the teen would have died if anyone had tried to pull the blade out. Amazingly, even though the blade penetrated so deeply, it had missed his brain. 2 of his friends had also been stabbed in the attack, one in the back and another in the shoulder, and they too recovered. The assailant, also in his teens, was subsequently found and arrested. Number 9. Tooth tumor. When doctors removed a benign tumor from the brain of a 4-month-old baby, they discovered that the growth presented several fully formed teeth. The medical profession suspected that something was wrong when it appeared that the infant's head had developed at an accelerated rate from the rest of his body. The growth was removed and the child was fully rehabilitated. It was the first case of the pituitary gland tumor called a craniopharyngioma developing teeth. Oddly enough, teeth have been found in human brains before, but in tumors called teratomas. They're rather unique because they have all 3 types of tissues found in early embryonic development. Craniopharyngioma, however, have a single tissue layer, and the infant's case proved that they develop from the same type of cells that produce teeth. Number 8. Patient revived 100 times. Jim McClatchy was taken to the hospital by his wife after she found him lying unconscious on the floor of their home in Atlanta, Georgia. McClatchy arrived at the emergency room, where doctors revived him multiple times. A virus affecting his cardiovascular system was causing the 54-year-old man to suffer repeated cardiac arrests. In the first hour alone, his heart stopped an estimated 50 times. Doctors had to shock his heart a staggering 100 times before the man was finally stabilized. McClatchy survived and recovered, but the defibrillator had been used on his chest to such an extent that he'd suffered second-degree burns. Number 7. Penal Ossification. In 2019, the pelvic X-ray of a 63-year-old man showed that his penis had started turning to bone. This, in scientific terms, is called penile ossification. It's extremely rare, with only a few dozen cases documented in medical literature. It's believed to be irreversible. In the patient's case, the formed bone ran through most of the length of his penis. The ossification was caused by a buildup of calcium salts in the man's soft tissues, which had gradually turned to bone. Number 6. Blue blood. A young Rhode Island woman arrived to the hospital complaining of weakness, shortness of breath, fatigue, and a blush discoloration of her skin. When doctors took her blood, they were shocked to find that it was blue instead of red. It's a rare condition called methemoglobinemia, in which hemoglobin can't properly release oxygen. In lack of proper oxygenation, bodily tissues and the blood become blue. This can be a genetic condition, or it may occur as a reaction to medication. The latter was the case for the Rhode Island patient, as she'd used a large quantity of numbing medication for a toothache. Number 5. Odd drunkenness. For 6 years, a middle-aged man had been dealing with spontaneous bouts of odd drunkenness, even though he wasn't drinking alcohol. He'd experienced all the associated symptoms, including brain fog, enhanced aggression, decreased inhibition, and a lack of coordination. The man was even arrested for drunk driving, exhibiting twice the legal limit, and fruitlessly explained to the officers that he hadn't consumed any alcohol. As the 46-year-old went to the doctors, they too didn't believe him, as he had elevated levels of alcohol in his blood. However, further examination indicated that the man had been telling the truth all along. He was diagnosed with the rare autobrewery syndrome. It seems that his gut microorganisms had been fermenting carbohydrates into alcohol. Yeast living in his gut was responsible for the conversion. The patient's gut microbiome was rebalanced with a mixture of antibiotics and probiotics. Number 4. Lung-shaped clot. In 2018, after a bout of intense coughing, a man expelled a giant blood clot that oddly resembled a lung. At the time, he was on blood-thinning medication for a heart condition. The risky aspect about the medication was that it could also cause bleeding. The man hadn't actually coughed up a piece of lung, as he'd initially assumed, but rather a blood mold of the airway passage called the bronchi. The blood had clotted in such a way that it formed a perfect cast of the right bronchial tree. The man's extreme coughing fit loosened the clot, and then he expelled it. Unfortunately, the patient wouldn't survive his condition and died a few days after the clot was reported. Number 3. 18-inch drill bit to the head. In what was deemed a miraculous occurrence, Ron Hunt survived after an 18-inch drill bit went clean through his head. In August of 2003, Hunt was on a ladder drilling into an overhead surface. He then lost his balance and landed face first on the drill. It punctured his eye and broke through the back of his head. While bleeding and terrified, Hunt was still conscious as his co-workers rushed him to the hospital. Doctors gave Hunt a large dose of morphine, then attempted to cut out the drill bit. After they noticed that the drill was loose, they opted to simply twist and unscrew it from the man's skull. Aside from his eye, which had been completely obliterated, Hunt made an incredible full recovery. He'd been extremely fortunate to have twisted his head at the right angle so that the drill had pushed his brain to the side rather than impale it directly. Today's topic was requested by Java Monsoon. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. Starry eyes. According to a report in the New England Journal of Medicine, an electrician who experienced a 14,000-volt electric shock developed star-shaped cataracts in both eyes. A cataract is essentially a clouding of the eye's lens that causes blurry vision. While a common development, the shape that the cataracts took in both eyes is rather unique. They were perfect stellates that went a complete 360 degrees around the outer edge of the lens. While surgery did restore some of the electrician's vision, the damage sustained by the optic nerve and the retina meant that he wouldn't fully regain sight.
Official They Will Kill You merchandise is now available at theywillkillyou.com. Some of it is to die for.
Number 1. Nails instead of hair. In 2009, Shania Isom was prescribed steroids for a severe asthma attack and subsequently suffered an extreme allergic reaction. As the mysterious illness took over, Isom's body was covered in black bumps and she started itching uncontrollably. She then started to grow human nails out of her hair follicles. According to her mother, the nails were hard and sharp to the touch. Isom's condition is unique as she produces 12 times the number of skin cells in each hair follicle. The root cause is unknown, but doctors suspected it was because her skin wasn't getting enough oxygen or due to a vitamin deficiency. Isom struggled to walk and do other basic activities and described her condition as a nightmare that she'd been trying to wake up from. While the illness overall remains a mystery, treatment at the Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore has helped Isom live with her debilitating condition. Thanks for watching. Have you got an odd medical story that you'd like to share with us after seeing this video? Let us know in the comments section below.